Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you've spent years losing. You've blown accounts. You've sat in that dark place where you question if you even have the brain for this. And then, slowly, something changes. You stop revenge trading. You start sticking to your rules. Your equity curve stops looking like a mountain range and starts looking like a staircase. Not vertical, but consistent. You're finally profitable. That moment, it's intoxicating. Not because of the money, but because of what it means. You finally belong. You're one of the few who made it. And then, almost inevitably, a thought creeps in. If I can do this, why not help others? Why not start a signal group? Charge a small fee, share my trades, build a community. It feels like the logical next step. You've conquered the market. Now you can be the mentor, the hero. But here on Losing Traders Psychology, we don't talk about moving averages or support and resistance. We talk about what lies between your ears. And today, I want to warn you about something I've seen destroy more profitable traders than any market crash ever could. I call it the mentor's curse. It's the slow, almost invisible unraveling of a trader's psychology when they shift from trading for themselves to trading for an audience. And if you're considering starting a signal service, or you're already in one and feel something is off, I need you to listen closely. Because the very consistency that made you successful, this shift can shatter it. When you trade alone, you exist in a state of pure process. You're a hunter in the woods. You wake up, you mark your levels, you wait. The market either gives you your setup or it doesn't. When you take a trade, you know that any single trade is just one data point in a series of 100. A loss. That's just the cost of doing business. You don't celebrate wins. You don't mourn losses. You execute, you review, you move on. Your ego is safe because no one is watching. Now, add an audience. A Telegram group with 300 people. A Discord server with notifications pinging every second. You send a signal. Suddenly, you're not just a trader anymore. You're the guy. The one who's supposed to have the answers. And that changes everything. What happens to your psychology is subtle at first. You stop caring about whether your system is working over the next 100 trades. Instead, you start obsessing over whether this specific trade is going to win. Because if it loses, it's not just a loss on your P&L. It's a public event. It's screenshots being shared. It's the quiet doubt in the chat. Maybe he's not as good as I thought. You shift from a process-driven mindset to an outcome-driven mindset. And in trading, that shift is deadly. I've watched mentors move their stop losses 3 times in a single trade because they couldn't bear the idea of being wrong in front of their members. I've seen them double their position size after a loss, not because the setup justified it, but because they felt they had to win it back for the group. They abandoned their own risk management. They abandoned the very edge that made them profitable. And here's the cruel irony. Their members don't even expect perfection. Most people who join a signal group know that losses happen. But the mentor, under the weight of their own perceived responsibility, starts demanding perfection from themselves. And the market does not care about your reputation. The market will humble you the moment you start trading for ego instead of edge. Let's talk about something nobody in the guru space will ever admit. When you trade alone, you carry one weight, your own financial risk. That's it. If you lose $100, it's your $100. You process it, you move on. When you send signals, you carry the weight of everyone else's fear. And fear is contagious. I call this the parasitic responsibility loop. It works like this. You send a signal at a price you believe is optimal. The market moves a few pips against you. Nothing structural, just normal noise. But your phone starts buzzing. Bro, it's dropping. Should we cut? This signal is bad. Even if you don't consciously acknowledge it, that collective anxiety seeps into your subconscious. You're now managing 300 emotions on top of your own. Now, most traders aren't psychologically equipped for that. They think they are. They tell themselves, I'll just ignore the chat. But you can't, because you've built this thing. You feel responsible. And so you start to do one of 3 things. 1, you overmanage. You close trades early because you want to show a win, even if it means leaving half the profit on the table. You kill your risk-to-reward ratio. You turn a high-probability system into a low-expectancy mess. 2, you become a tyrant. The anxiety in the chat makes you angry. You start lashing out at members for asking questions. You create a toxic environment where people are afraid to speak up. And deep down, you know that's not who you wanted to be. But the pressure has made you reactive. 3, And this is the one that breaks my heart. You cheat. Not necessarily consciously, but you start taking fewer trades yourself while still sending signals. Or you run a demo account alongside your live account, so you can cherry-pick the winning signals to show. You become the coach who doesn't play the game anymore. And once you cross that line, you've lost yourself as a trader. The identity you built, I'm a profitable trader who helps others, becomes a performance. And the market always exposes performance. This is the deepest cut, and it happens so slowly that most traders don't realize it until they've already changed. When you start a signal service or a paid mentorship, you monetize your expertise. That's not inherently bad. You've put in the work. You deserve to be compensated. But here's the thing. The market doesn't care about your monthly subscription fees. Some weeks are beautiful. Clear trends, perfect setups, one winning trade after another. And then comes a week, maybe two, where the market turns into a choppy mess. No clear direction, no high probability setups. If you're a pure trader, you sit on your hands. You do nothing. You preserve capital. You wait. But if you're a signal provider with bills to pay, with members who are paying for action, what do? This is where the identity crisis begins. You start to feel pressure to manufacture trades. Not because the market is offering them, but because you need to justify the subscription. You lower your standards. You start seeing setups that aren't really there. You convince yourself that maybe this one is good enough. And in doing so, you transition from trader to entertainer. Think about that. An entertainer's job is to keep the audience engaged. A trader's job is to wait for edge and execute with discipline. You cannot serve two masters. The moment your primary concern becomes keeping the chat happy rather than preserving your capital, your psychology is no longer aligned with the market. It's aligned with the crowd. And we know, from decades of trading psychology research, that the crowd is almost always wrong at the exact moment they are most confident. So when you start trading to please the crowd, you start trading against your own long-term survival. I've watched talented, consistent traders turn into nervous wrecks within 6 months of starting a signal group. They stopped trusting their own analysis. They started hesitating on entries because they were second-guessing how it would look. They stopped being the hunter and became the hunted by their own audience's expectations. So, does this mean you can't be a mentor? Does it mean every signal group is destined to corrupt the trader running it? No, but it does mean that if you want to survive, if you want to be one of the rare few who can trade and lead, you need something most traders never develop. You need iron psychological boundaries. Let me be specific. First, you need to accept a brutal reality. If you take a trade for yourself and send it as a signal, you must be willing to lose your reputation on that trade. Not might lose, willing to lose. You have to detach your self-worth from the outcome of any single signal. That means you cannot look at a losing trade and feel shame. You cannot let the chatter in the chat room dictate whether you stick to your plan. The trade either hits your stop or it hits your target. That's it. If you can't stomach looking wrong in front of an audience, you cannot send signals. Full stop. Second, you need structural separation. I've seen the mentors who survive do this. They send the signal, they set their alerts, and then they close the chat. For the duration of the trade, they don't look. They treat the group as a broadcast, not a conversation. They know that the moment they start engaging with the fear in real time, they'll get pulled into the loop. Third, and this is the one most mentors resist, you need to stop defining your value by the win rate of your signals. If you want to truly help people, shift your focus. Teach them process. Teach them psychology. Give them education, not just entries. Because when you're known as the person who helps traders understand themselves, you're not trapped in the role of must be right on every trade. You become something more sustainable, a guide. I'm not saying it's easy. The financial incentive to just keep pumping out signals is enormous. But if you want to keep your edge as a trader, if you want to be one of the few who can do this for years without burning out, you have to protect your psychology with the same discipline you use to protect your account. Because as we've learned here on Losing Traders Psychology, the biggest losses aren't in your P&L. They're in your mind. I want to hear from you. Have you ever tried to trade for a group? Maybe you've run a signal service, or maybe you've just shared your trades with a few friends. Did you find yourself making worse decisions because people were watching? Did you feel that pressure to be perfect? Comment below. Let's talk about it. Because the more we understand how social pressure warps our trading decisions, the better we can protect ourselves from it. If this video resonated with you, If you're serious about mastering the psychological side of trading, hit that subscribe button. We don't teach you how to read charts here. There are 1,000 channels for that. We teach you how to read yourself. I'll see you in the next one.